Okay, so we've got here McCook, a good friend of mine. I met you down in Melbourne at at one of the first Australian Bitcoin conferences. What I've done is I recorded your recent talk, actually held to high acclaim, in Sydney, about the relative sustainability of Bitcoin. A lot of people ask things like, how green is Bitcoin mining? How much power it uses? Isn't that a big waste? It's a good question, right? And if only someone had done the research. I guess you thought that because you've done quite a lot of research. Why don't you just give us a bit of background about yourself, where you came from, how you came to Bitcoin maybe, and then what this research you did was and what the results were, and we'll throw to the video of you delivering that talk. Go for it.
Well, my background's a civil engineer. Got a Bachelor of Engineering, a Master of Engineering, and most recently an MBA from Oxford.
Oxford, I've heard of that school.
Yeah. having a background in infrastructure, I've delivered about $20–25 billion worth of Australian infrastructure. So I've got a very good idea of the impact of very big things, especially things like building roads, digging tunnels, mining for gold. And when I saw my lovely poor Bitcoin being slandered all over the media for being quite unsustainable, I thought to myself, do people actually know what it takes to get gold out of the ground? So started doing my research, and the research kept expanding and expanding, and it ended up being a sort of a series on the relative sustainability of Bitcoin compared to getting gold out of the ground, printing and minting paper currency, and what it takes to keep the lights on for all of those millions of bank branches around the world.
Awesome, right. So you did the numbers and you delivered a talk at CryptoCon. That was in mid-2014, and I think a lot of people would love to see that talk. Now, I managed to capture that, only I didn't realize you were coming on at that point, and I missed the first few minutes, but you've just so the basic premise you've given us, and what just as a summary, what did you find?
Basically found that when comparing Bitcoin to legacy systems, at the current moment in time, it's an absolute no contest. Further to that, printing and minting and mining is only becoming harder to do, more energy intensive, more polluting, whereas because Bitcoin's a technology, we know thanks to things like Moore's law and Kumi's law, as time tends to infinity, greenhouse impact of Bitcoin is also going to tend to zero. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. But it's pretty green as is, and getting greener by the day.
That's great. Good to see some science and some economics done on this rather than just opinion. Thanks very much.
Average greenhouse gases produced by an average megawatt hour of electricity is about 0.6 tons of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour of energy. So how does Bitcoin look then? So we've got an annual electricity consumption based on that hash rate of about just over 1 million megawatt hours, annual energy consumption of just over about 4 million joules, and carbon emissions of under 1 million tons, but I'd be happy to round it up to 1 million tons. The approximate electricity cost is about $100 million or so. How did these averages get collated? Based on a guess of distribution of mining hardware throughout the network. So this is kind of the cutting edge, state of the art of retail ASICs you can buy. We know that gigahash.io, which holds about 20% of all ASIC hardware, is powered with Bitfury BF3500s. And we know that CX.io, which makes up half of gigahash, is charging about $3 a gigahash to mine online. So average price per gigahash, weighted average about $2.50, and average watts per gigahash about 0.9. So how does it stack up? Actually, some exclusions from the scope of my study is I didn't really assess the environmental impact of producing the ASIC machines, simply because we know that when it comes to computer hardware, most of the environmental impact is made during their life, during use, electricity burning. Secondly, 95% of e-waste is recyclable, so if we're responsible consumers, we should recycle our ASICs when they become paperweights every 6 months. And, when it comes to Bitcoin mining machinery and mining machinery, well, really, this is the Bagger 2800. This bad boy weighs 13,000 tons of steel, and look at all that waste rock it's churning out. That little guy is this little guy compared to a human. So if somebody wants to tell you that Bitcoin mining ASICs are wasteful, point them to the gold mining industry. And here's what a Bitcoin mine looks like. Pretty simple. There's one of the new ant miners, the S3, which is pound for pound cheapest dollars per gigahash and least amount of watts per gigahash. So according to the laws of perfect competitive markets, you can expect the ant miner S3 to slowly saturate the mining market as people clutch for short-term economic profit. So how does Bitcoin stack up with other monetary systems? So gold mining every year, 475 million gigajoules, over 100 times more than Bitcoin. Tons of carbon produced, 54 million. So that's just energy and CO2. How about the externalities? So 2,700 tons of gold are mined every year. That's not even enough gold to fill this room roof to ceiling. It's 140 cubic meters of gold, that's it. Whereas 4 billion tons of waste rock is a cone with a base diameter of 2 kilometers and a height of 1 kilometer. So all the gold we pull out is a veritable needle in the haystack. So once we get this mountain of rock out of the ground, we soak it in 400,000 tons of cyanide and 810 billion liters of water, and gold comes out of the rock, and we take the gold. So for reference, 810 billion liters of water is the water consumption of Sydney and Brisbane combined, plus about another 70 billion liters of water. So that's gold. Recycling is okay because it really only just uses electricity and a couple of chemicals. About a third of all gold is recycled every year, all the gold we produce. So about 2,700 tons are mined, about 1,300 tons are recycled. Printing and minting. Energy used to produce basically valueless pieces of paper. 10 times more than Bitcoin mining. 7 million tons of CO2, along with about 10 billion liters of water, 10,000 tons of cotton, and 210,000 tons of metal for coinage every year. The banking system, well, that's really no comparison anywhere. The top 20 banks themselves employ 8 million people, and just based on these 8 million people, keeping the lights on, computers on, for all that kind of stuff, for these 8 million people. This is just the top 20 banks. So I've just assumed that the top 20 banks employ all the banking employees in the world. The numbers used here are spat out by a model that was produced by the Civil Engineering Department at the University of California, Berkeley, which is tried and tested for every industry. So if you're interested in playing around with that model, the link's somewhere here in the bibliography of this report, and you can go from there. Whereas Bitcoin, no externalities, just electricity and producing some ASICs. Okay, what if you don't believe in climate change? Several people don't believe in it. Like back to fiction. So let's have a. So for the people that don't believe in climate change and just want to have a general idea about sustainability in general, which is the triple bottom line, social and economic. Let's have a look at social and economic sustainability of all the monetary systems. Annual economic costs. So data from the gold mining industry shows us that it costs about $1,100 to get an ounce of gold out of the ground, and today they're selling it for about $1,300. So the mining companies right now making some okay profit on gold. Gold recycling costs about $40 billion to get, which is actually quite cheap. $40 billion for 1,700 tons of gold is actually okay. Good value for money. Printing and minting costs about $28 billion a year in supplies and electricity, and produces probably about $1 trillion worth of paper. So that difference is captured by government called seigniorage. The banking system, the total cost to produce 3 trillion of revenue is 1.87 trillion, of which 65 billion electricity costs, and right now, based on having to buy an ASIC every 6 months and juicing it into electricity, is just under $1 billion. Social impacts. So with gold, our health and safety on site has improved quite a bit, but we've had 50,000 recorded deaths over the last, since records were kept in 1914. China doesn't keep records, so can't give you the numbers for China. But we've got it down to about 100 a year now, with the exception of big spikes. I think 300 miners died in South Africa this year in the gold mines, hence why gold production in South Africa stopped because of all the riots and unrest for poor safety. Meanwhile, no one's ever mined dying a Bitcoin. No. Only the ones that want to get electrocuted.
And most don't have them in their living room.
Yeah, I suppose not. So, worker deaths. Who knows how many slaves died getting gold for the pharaohs? But let's not worry about that to be overly unfair on gold. Corruption, money laundering, and black markets. So the World Bank and CIA have data for gold fraud and people coring gold bullion and stuffing them with tungsten and all that kind of stuff. And that cost the world economy about $600 million a year. Not really that much in the scheme of things. In the fiat world, corrupt politicians and public servants cost the world 1.6 trillion of its economy every year. Money laundering is valued at 2.65 trillion every year, and black markets 1.8 trillion every year. And there's detailed breakdowns of all of those in the report. Whereas corruption, money laundering, and black markets, no one's getting bribed with Bitcoin yet. But I'm sure when it becomes, $15,000, $20,000 a coin, all the politicians will love it. Institutional fraud and theft. Lots of people say Mt. Gox, very bad, 500 million stolen. I agree. Or 400 million it was at the time in BTC equivalent. But every major Bitcoin theft ever recorded, and I've got them outlined in the report, stack up to just under $500 million. Meanwhile, institutional fraud costs our world economy 3.8 trillion a year, and several trillion recorded throughout history. This doesn't count the world financial collapse. In terms of gold, we've got 21 billion across 2 single events. Just 2 months ago, the Chinese found $15 billion worth of unbacked, supposedly backed commodities contracts. And in Canada, a big Canadian mining company, I think it's called Rex, publicly listed, said it had $6 billion of gold reserves. They didn't have squat, so they ran away with $6 billion of investor money. And again, Spanish galleons and whatnot throughout history, untold amounts of gold as a result of fraud and theft. Transactional fraud, not many people transacting gold these days, so it's not really available, but again, if you want to look back thousands of years, quite a bit. Transactional fraud in fiat currency, just based on credit card fraud, 190 billion a year. Whereas in Bitcoin, since 2 plus 2 will always equal 4, transactional fraud is impossible. Taking a look at inflation, gold is deflationary in the long term, so too is Bitcoin. But every 17.5 years, on average globally, you lose half of your value every 17.5 years. So definitely bad to hoard fiat, but not so bad to hoard gold and Bitcoin. But after seeing the sustainability numbers, who'd really want to hoard any gold? Okay, future trends of Bitcoin mining. We've got 2 big trends that have stood true for a very long time. We've got Kumi's law and Moore's law. Basically, Kumi's law says every year and a half, the amount of energy you need to make a computation halves. That's why you've got these slick i7 laptops now that run for 8 hours, whereas back in the day, an i7 running on an IBM brick battery probably lasted about 4 seconds. At the rate of doubling every year and a half, energy use decreases by a factor of 100 every 10 years. So you could expect the industry best average gigahash rate of 0.888 watts per gigahash to go down to 0.087 watts per petahash. So based on today's, so if we get efficiency this efficient, today's Bitcoin network can run on less power than a 12.5 watt energy saving light bulb. And this law will be in place until 2048, when it starts going on the border of violating the laws of thermodynamics. But this is how the computers have been functioning since 1950, and will go towards 2048. Moore's law, I think everyone in this room knows Moore's law. But as we approach the size of the silicon atom, which is 12 nanometers, we can't, like most ASIC infrastructures now run on 28 nanos. Some running on 20. Getting down to 12 will take probably another 10 years or so. But once you get to 12, well, that's the size of the silicon atom. So we'll probably have to make a shift into using some other material for computers if Moore's laws to keep going. But at this rate, based on technology, we know Moore's law is coming to a close in about 2020. Based on that, the current industry average best dollars per gigahash for $1.13, tending towards about 7 cents a gigahash. And as a sense check of these numbers, we've got the next state-of-the-art Bitcoin ASICs made by Spondoolies, the SP30, which is shipping in September, has the following stats. So already about half of our industry best watt per gigahash, and already about half of our dollars per gigahash. Parting thoughts. Okay. So for those of us that are willing to back their principles and morals with their money, Bitcoin provides the opportunity for socially, environmentally, and economically conscious global citizens to choose to no longer participate in this fragile and rotten system that we spent thousands of years building, and voluntarily choose to participate in the wondrous Bitcoin ecosystem. Due to several benefits and significantly increased burden on both our society and our planet, there is a very certain feeling of inevitability about the overtaking of digital currencies. Whether that's Bitcoin or even more sustainable currency, no one knows yet, but the genie is very well out of the box, and it's here to stay. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just quickly, at the risk of asking a stupid question. Why is the gold analysis important, considering that, as best as I know, money is now no longer backed by gold as a reference?
Yeah, true. So gold, I suppose, is important because there's lots of investor money tied up into gold. So the breakdown for gold, let me get it for you.
I think I'm doing this to get more of
a sure. Reaction. So this is how gold is used every year. We've got 44% of it locked up in jewelry. Or not, sorry, this is demand by source. Yearly demand of gold from the World Gold Council. 44% for jewelry, 36% for investment and speculation, 10% for technology and industry, and 10% for the official sector. There are still a couple of small countries that back their currency with gold, and like I said, all those billions of dollars we spend mining gold, we pull out 140 cubic meters of it. So that's a 10 by 5 room with a 2.5 meter ceiling.
So given, if we were to take out your gold research, just as a matter of circumstance, I still think what you're proposing is substantiated, even by the fact of just printing paper money itself and all the consequence of that, as opposed to just the...
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Did you ever divide sort of the numbers that you've got by transactional volume, for example, of fiat money?
No, because it's an invalid comparison. The reason I believe it's an invalid comparison is because we don't know what Bitcoin can and will become. Like I showed a couple of slides back, at this, with potential of having this and the potential of having that, when Bitcoin eventually scales to 1 million times its size, if it does, even at 1 million times its impact on those numbers, the impact is still insignificant compared to fiat. So that's why I didn't, because it's too harsh to punish Bitcoin as an ecosystem with only 3 or 4 million users, and we'll just have to let it grow and see what happens. I'll be updating this research, probably about once every 6 months at the end of the financial year, to include what the latest state of the art is in mining equipment, and how that multiplied by the network hash rates and whatnot goes to. Also, another thing we might note is that energy cost and energy impact, carbon impact, is tending towards zero, and Bitcoin might be the catalyst that helps push that along. The reason for this is miners are in it for the profit, right? And a big part of your run cost, of your OPEX basically, is the cost of electricity. So it is in the interest of miners to go where electricity is cheapest. At the moment, the cheapest electricity in the world is hydroelectric, and it also happens to be the cleanest energy in the world. With costs of solar also obeying Kumi's law, we'll see more decentralized renewable energy come online, either in the shape of off-the-grid solar installations or off-the-grid fuel cell installations, and the really big, serious miners will just sort of show the Energy Australias of the world their backsides and just run their own clean, free energy. So that's why I think Bitcoin is more important than we think it is, And luckily for us, the push for profit will push us towards a more sustainable future.
Just wondering, is there any big institutional miners here?
Not as big as BHP. So if somebody with market cap of BHP were to throw their 40, 50 billion behind Bitcoin, it might be quite profitable for them in the long run. Yeah.
Do you know what the approximate value of gold in circulation is as a proportion of total fiat in circulation, so to speak?
No, but I do know how many tons of gold there are in the world. 74,000 tons or something?
174,000.
There you go. So that's $7 trillion worth of gold or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, we can run the quick number. So if there's $7 trillion worth of gold. You know what? There you go, just about even. So if there's $7 trillion worth of gold, and in the pursuit of gold every year we spend, $475 million, 470 million gigajoules of energy to get it at that external cost. Market cap of Bitcoin is 9 billion, so it's about 80 times less. 80 times 4, 320, still less than 475.